From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee Pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is the top of the week. If you are hearing this the evening it comes out, welcome, friends and neighbors, to October 21st. We have so much in store for you. We have a lot of things that we might not get to, but on a positive note for our cold open, cool update, the Rangers in Wyoming have decided to stop blowing up dead horses.
I thought you were referring to a sports team for a second. I get you now. The actual Rangers.
Yeah. They're done with blowing up dead horses. Now, a lot of us would say, cool, that's another headline like Space Bricks that gives us a lot of questions already in the statement. It is apparently due to the wildfire risk that is posed when you blow up the horse carcass.
Remember that story from years back where they blew up a whale carcass on a beach somewhere, and it was a horrible idea because the guts and smelly, awful stuff just flew like way farther than they were expecting. I know a horse isn't a whale, but still seems like there'd be some potential for catastrophic gut flinging.
Yeah, if you want to learn more, please do check out the excellent article in The Guardian published pretty recently. Shout out to Richard Luscombe. Apparently, this has been a ongoing policy. They just exploded the carcasses forever, and now they are stopping it. So we're looking for good news. Obviously, there's a holy war going on, or it's being advertised as such. There's mysterious stuff washing up on beaches. We got true crime for you. We've got some dangerous Ottomans. And of course, as we are all in love with space, we have some space exploration, and we promise not to make too many, urine, blood, and potato flake jokes. Right? Can we promise that?
I can't do that.
Okay. Matt is refusing totally. All right.
Matt's giving a soft yes. No, Matt's giving a soft yes. He's giving a soft yes.
Soft yes.
It's hard to guarantee a thing like that, Ben. It just comes up, and you got to go where the spirit moves you.
Yeah, agreed. Also, Soft Yes is the band we made up for our pal Paul Decant many years ago.
Indeed. It's like a kind of a new wave synth pop type band, I believe.
He's still he was never mad about the joke, but he was disappointed. So, folks, coming into tonight's exploration, you may have noticed, longtime listeners, that we had a classic episode published in place of our weekly listener mail segment. We are in good spirits. We're happy. Like many other people, we have been dealing with the aftermath of natural disasters in the southeastern United States. Keeping the folks in North Carolina in our thoughts. They just got walloped with hurricane weather, and then they got walloped with snow. It's actually snowing in parts of North Carolina now.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. And also, I would argue we and the U.S. entire has encountered something that people weren't predicting. Another knock-on consequence of hurricanes, which is hurricane conspiracy theories. One of the elected politicians in our home state of Georgia controversially claimed that weather controlling technology was deployed, heavily implying that that was used to weaponize hurricanes. That is MTG, not Magic the Gathering, sadly. And I always wish it was Magic the Gathering, but
what is it though, Ben?
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, yes. Sorry. She occupies so little real estate in my head. I don't even think of the acronym. Gotcha.
It's a smart choice not to think of it. Did you guys hear that statement from that politician?
Yeah, but yes, it's a bizarre thing to talk about because, we know that, to what end, first of all? You know what I mean? Like, what to deploy this technology, were it to exist in this way, like, what's the point? It just seems very expensive in terms of everyone's investment, whether it be FEMA, whether it be insurance companies. It just seems like a real dumb move. I just can't see any benefit to deploying this to ruin people's lives and skyrocket insurance rates.
The accusations I've been seeing online have to do with an attempt to somehow mess up the early voting for the presidential election.
Right.
Which is... it's troubling to see it like that, especially
mainstreamed
when,
in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. When it's such an out there claim. And then a lot of people take it seriously and then turn around and at least make a TikTok video about it or an Instagram reel about it. And then it just continues the flow.
And well, speaking of flow, it's clogging up a lot of resources because they're having to take actual facts time to explain to people that no, this is not the case, and it's taking away from like the work that they could be doing and the other, you know, types of communications they could be fielding that are much more life-saving and livelihood-saving.
And to step back for the larger context, let's be quite transparent here. Weather modification technology does exist, but in a relatively primitive form. We've discussed it at length in episodes in the past. You can do things like cloud seeding. The problem is global weather systems are highly interconnected. So you're not, you know, it's a lot less like pushing one domino down without interfering with other dominoes. And it's a lot more like flicking, you know, a mobile or a mobile. You know what I'm talking about? The little things that hang from the ceiling to like babies
over
play
the
with
baby,
them.
over the baby's crib.
Yeah. And so it affects this system. And often when we hear conspiracies or claims of conspiracy about weather modification, it's putting a lot of, no offense, science, it's putting a lot of undeserved credit toward current weather f***ery. Right. And thank you for beeping me there, because there's not a level of discrete control. Every country that has tried it has gotten smacked with unforeseen consequences, from U.S. operations in the Southeast Theater to Chinese cloud seeding in advance of things like the 2008 Olympics. And so the weather modification, that's just one thing. We could even do an episode on this.
If you don't mind, Ben, I just think there's just two things we have to point out here. We know that there are advanced research projects that DARPA funds for things that would attempt to be more robust weather modification, right? We know that DARPA funds that kind of stuff. And we also know that we don't know all of the research projects that are happening anywhere that have a darkened budget somehow. And when you've got somebody in the position of Marjorie Taylor Greene or somebody like that, there's a perception that because this person holds that position, they may know more than we do because they've been maybe privy to documentation that the public doesn't get access to. So then there's this feeling, at least a perception, that maybe this could be real when you have somebody at that level speaking so certainly about it publicly. And it really just does feel dangerous because, as you're saying, some weather modification is real, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that something like that could exist. But the fact that somebody is saying it with so certainly that it is definitely happening, it just causes, I think, some of our brains to malfunction a little bit and believe it.
Right. You've anticipated my final point there, which is, yes, Congress does. Members of legislation or legislator, they do have access to things that are occluded from the voting public. Therefore, yes, let's let that point stand. What we do need to get to here is the moment of empathy. Please, folks, take a moment and realize that the people at FEMA are not villains. They're working so hard, right? And often underpaid. There are a lot of misconceptions about FEMA. And one of the misconceptions that seems to be proliferating now, even more so than it did in the wake of things like Katrina, is the idea that FEMA is part of a deep state bound up in the idea of weather modification as well. And we were talking about FEMA briefly off air. Would you guys say there is more disinformation spreading about FEMA in the wake of these disasters, or is this par for the course?
It feels like certainly more because it's an active effort. And it's almost like in situations like this, you barely even need people stirring the pot to get the potential for those kinds of conspiracy theories floating around. And so when you actually have people actively proliferating misinformation, it stirs the pot in a really, really chaotic and nasty way. And like, I mean, if I were to imagine what type of weather control or modification technology is being researched or would be deployed in our country by our government, I mean, maybe I'm naive here, but I'd like to think that it would be stuff that could break up storm systems like that.
Right.
Right. Before they get to the places that it's literally decimating our country. It just doesn't make sense. I don't understand. And I don't see a particular political viewpoint being targeted in these demographics that were hit. Georgia, North Carolina, these are places, I mean, I just don't understand. These are places that it seems would largely support Marjorie Taylor Greene's political ambitions.
Well, I think that's what's being said, right? That they're being targeted because they are conservative voters.
Oh, so it's the other side that's due. I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So
The idea is that would interfere with early voting. To step back to the point you were making there, Noel, one thing these regions have in common is that they are historically, geographically vulnerable to hurricanes. A little known fact, there have been, and I love that point you made, there have been historical efforts to control hurricanes. They have failed. In the decades between the 1960s and the 1980s, Uncle Sam toyed with the idea of making storms bigger in size, but weaker in intensity. The idea being we could spread out, I say we, I was not involved in this, the idea that you could spread out this thing and through spreading it out, reduce the tremendous damage they can do.
The acuteness of it.
Yeah. General Electric in the U.S. military back in 1947 dropped dry ice out of Air Force planes into the path of a hurricane. And they thought maybe that'll weaken it. Spoiler, that also didn't work. What I'm trying to bring us back to here is the idea that FEMA itself is getting people contracting for FEMA or having to stop working. To your earlier point about resource allocation, they're having to stop because they are being targeted by militias, by bad faith actors, people who drank the Flavor Aid. And yes, it was Flavor Aid, folks, not Kool-Aid. But have you guys heard about the idea that FEMA, I almost said operatives, but like people working for FEMA or under that auspice are being targeted?
I have. Yeah, death threats and the like. And there's things just that are life-threatening at the worst and horribly distracting maybe at the most diplomatic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know one particular contractor, I think, pulled back all of their workers, right, after some death threats from individuals, right? Not, at least early on in the reporting, it wasn't a whole group or someone that was coming out and saying, we're going to attack you, but it was individuals who these groups were continually encountering, like one homeowner to the next one where there was an actual threat. And it got to the point where I think somebody even got arrested, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And this is why I think this could be an episode. As we go into that idea, it's important to correct a common misconception a lot of folks have about FEMA, which is FEMA doesn't really have its own, standing army of water mitigation experts or what have you. They partner with other groups, right? They will partner with the Army Corps of Engineers. They will reach out to local and regional contractors. So we were talking about this a little bit off air. The dangerous thing about what's been happening here, especially in North Carolina quite recently, is the idea that the guy who was your sump pump dude, 2 years ago, now all of a sudden he's part of a deep state. The logic struggles, right? And we know that in specific, the rampant disinformation began as FEMA was responding to Hurricane Helene, which, as we know, hit Florida on September 26th and ultimately left a trail of wild destruction across 6 different states. people were also criticizing the current Biden administration as we record, again with the concept being, the larger narrative spine being, that there is a concerted effort of some sort to disenfranchise people who might vote one way or another. And I feel like it's gonna continue. You used the word decimate earlier, Noel, and Helene in particular, and also later Milton, decimated remote towns, which means they didn't obliterate them, but they definitely made things terrible.
Right, but some of them though are just gone. Yeah.
And FEMA had to advise all federal responders in Rutherford County to leave the county immediately. The U.S. Forest Service also sent multiple reports to associated agencies because of the concern that armed militias would take action against them based on these conspiracy theories. If you want to read more, please do check out the excellent article in the Washington Post by Brianna Sachs and Dan Lamoth. North Carolina authorities arrest an armed man after threats against FEMA workers. So they did at least arrest one guy. His name's William Jacob Parsons. He's 44 years old, because he was making actionable threats against a government agency. And I know, you've heard this show, fellow conspiracy realist. We talk a lot of trash. I think we're very fair about it. But we also don't make actionable threats against federal level agencies. And you also should avoid doing that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Bad form. Yeah.
I just want to go back to this fear of FEMA. Do you remember the FEMA camps theories that we covered early in the video series? Mm-hmm. When people thought there were FEMA detention camps that were being set up for basically political prisoners to be sent en masse? Mm-hmm. And the coffin liners, the black plastic coffin liners that were seen in satellite imagery.
What do you think it is about them that breeds that kind of thinking? I guess I don't fully understand where this comes from.
Because they're often going into rural areas. And it's a federal level force. And if you are not, if you're not familiar with the structure of FEMA, then, also you're encountering one of the most terrible times of your life. You are not maybe cognizant that these are a lot of contractors, right? They don't work for FEMA full time. They travel around to address these things. So imagine you're in a fairly localized environment, and all of a sudden this big acronym sweeps in, right? And they're going door to door. They're telling you things. If you're already kind of a small government or less is better kind of ideological stance, then this can seem very evil empire.
Yeah, well, and they generally make big moves, right? Because we're saying there's like individuals going door to door, like teams going door to door. But when FEMA moves to an area to set up aid essentially for a region, they move en masse and they create big areas where they're operating out of. And if you've got people online maybe taking a video of a FEMA response area coming up while you're saying things that sound kind of scary into the camera about it. It feels like, oh man, this is, it literally is government moving into our area.
It's an occupation that's being interpreted as an occupation.
It depends on the context that's being delivered to you around whatever is actually happening. I don't know. It goes back to the 80s, guys. I didn't realize there's stuff in here about Reagan when FEMA was operating, and there were like real fears about it, which probably, then go into things like some of the raids that occurred and are very famous nowadays. I think it all gets intertwined. And this whole thing doesn't help, especially when there's actual facts, stuff being reported by CBS and other places about those lithium mines in North Carolina and about the Pentagon's massive injection of money, like $90 million into the lithium mines by the Pentagon last September. So then you add that as context, and then you start talking about, oh, they just want this lithium, right?
So if we declare it a disaster area and we can swoop in and take control, then is that kind of the idea?
My point is that you combine all these things together and you make it sound very scary. And to somebody on the ground there who was seeing bits and pieces of it in real life, it then becomes terrifying and something you need to take action against.
So we also see that U.S. meteorologists have been facing death threats, which is terrible because I always feel like meteorologists, or I think everyone can agree, if you're a meteorologist, you get a lot of flack because you're already in a Kobayashi Maru situation, an unwinnable thing. So, in either a future listener mail segment or in perhaps an episode, we'll address some of the things briefly referenced here, such as the lithium mine conspiracy. Thank you again to everybody from North Carolina in particular who has taken the time to contact us regarding this. Went on Twitter, which is now, peak conspiracy, and asked about some other hurricane theories, which we will get to. The original point we want to end on here, despite this brief discourse, is to please stay safe, please exercise empathy, and understand the points made earlier. Refer to the fact that when people don't have all the information and they're in a very scary time, humans are pattern recognizers, right? Humans are incident organizers, curators of experience. So we can predictably see more dangerous disinformation in the near to mid future because natural disasters will continue at, dare I say, an unnatural pace. Would love to hear your stories. Would love to hear your firsthand accounts. Please, please, please consider us a resource for other things people should know. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. We'll pause for a word from our sponsors. We'll get to some more stuff later, but for now, I think it's time we take a trip to a beach.
And we have returned, and Ben set it up perfectly. I do have two sort of shorter stories today, but the first one does involve a trip to a beach, the coast of Newfoundland in Canada, where beachcombers since September have been spotting some very unusual material washing up on the beach amidst the, jellyfish and kelp and all of that good stuff. This stuff much more closely resembles like something akin to fried dough or like sort of globules of like pizza dough almost. It's really bizarre. There's a guy from Newfoundland, from the area, who spoke to the BBC's Jessica Murphy from their report on this, who said that it was like someone had tried to bake bread and done a lousy job and described it smelling something akin to vegetable oil. And there have been reports of this weird globby stuff washing up, like I said, since September. And government officials in Ottawa, which is the part of Canada where Newfoundland is, have visited the site multiple times and done some testing, preliminary testing, which has thus far determined the material to be plant-based. And if you go to this BBC article, you should be able to find it just by Googling mysterious blobs on the BBC. You can see lots of pictures of this stuff, and it really does look kind of like wet, squishy blobs of dough. There has been a lot of online chatter about this, a lot of speculation from different beachcomber groups online, and I imagine it's started to filter out into other, corners of the internet. But some of the conjecture involves thinking it to be some kind of mold or fungus, or perhaps palm oil, paraffin wax, or even ambergris, which I'm certain we've discussed on the show before. It is there's a really great Bob's Burgers episode about ambergris, which is this really smelly, waxy stuff that is expelled from the bellies of whales. And it actually, I don't quite understand the process, but it is used to make fine perfumes and fragrances. Yes. And it's very, very valuable.
It adds depth, warmth, and longevity to the scent.
So they say. It's weird how valuable it is. But do check out the Bob's Burgers episode about ambergris. I think Gene really enjoys eating it, and it's a whole thing involving Mr. Fish Odor and all of the folks down at the beach in Bob's Burgers. The Environment and Climate Change Canada office, a spokesperson of theirs, told the BBC that they're going to have to take some additional samples and analyze further in order to determine what the substance is and what its potential environmental impact might be. They have largely been spotted in an area, the shorelines of an area called Placenta Bay. which is kind of weird.
Placentia or something
Placentia, yeah, but I mean, you can't ignore. Well, you can't ignore it, guys. I mean, and these things do kind of have like a placenta kind of look to them.
But they know the composition, though, right? Like, isn't the question more provenance, like the origin and the why?
Oh, Ben, all I saw in the BBC reporting, which is largely what I saw other people kind of citing, was that they determined it to be plant-based. But did you maybe see an update that I missed?
Well, we're fascinated with this stuff, especially with our previous collaborations on strange things falling from the sky. And I love they're pointing out ambergris.
Angel goo? What was it called?
Oh, yeah. Right. Hey, star jelly?
That's the one. Yeah. Angel goo, star jelly, potato.
So I love that you're bringing this story up because I read that the blobs were formed from or seem to be comprised of seaweed, sand, and small stones, but they're slippery and apparently they're also flammable, which I don't associate with, snot of the sea. And I love, I love snot of the sea. I eat oysters all the time. They're like the
how very brave was the man who first ate an oyster.
I think about that too. Yeah.
I do too. Yeah, no, but it's funny. Like the article from Jessica Murphy from the 12th of October, today being the 16th, didn't have that detail in it. So I appreciate you bringing that up because that is very interesting. I do think that there will still need to be more data collected and analyzed for them to understand where it comes from, because it could potentially be a side effect or a byproduct of something else, like some sort of maybe manufacturing process or what have you, that could be either out of step with regulations, causing, further pollution or contamination, or it could be something more unusual than that. There is a really interesting quote that wraps up this article from that Stan Tobin guy who called it badly baked bread. He lives in an area called Ship Cove, which is a very small village along the bay, and he walks on the beaches often, and he described it as hundreds and hundreds of globs, big globs, little globs, with about a maximum diameter of 6 inches or 15 centimeters. He's one of the people who initially called the Canadian Coast Guard to report what he had seen, and he had this to say, which I thought was a good way of wrapping up the story. Somebody or somebodies know where this came from and how it got there, and knows damn well it's not supposed to be here. So, Tobin's got the right idea. He gets it. Yeah. But yeah, do you guys, I think this is one to follow. It could be nothing, but I know, as you said, Ben, we're always a fan of mysterious globular substances. Do you guys have anything to add before I move on to this next one?
Sounds like a yeasty, yucky thing.
Yeah, the beast on yeast.
Has anyone tried to eat it? Can we sell it at like a high dollar, bed and breakfast or something?
Gene from Bob's Burgers would have eaten it first thing.
Classic.
That's exactly what would have happened. Classic, but very, 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 very weird looking stuff. Interesting that nobody quite knows where it's coming from yet, but hopefully we'll hear some more soon. I am going to move from Canada to still a pretty northern area, Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. It's kind of Canada-like in some ways. It does feel, oftentimes, parts of Michigan feel like a different universe. And I guess maybe I'm romanticizing it because of that incredible Sufjan Stevens album, Michigan, that does paint this very kind of lore-rich portrait of Michigan and the different parts of it from, his perspective growing up there. But this is not about that kind of vibe. This is a pretty horrific thing that happened to some children and some medical professionals back in 2022. Apparently, at a psychiatric hospital for children, a active shooter drill took place at this facility, a state-run facility known as Hawthorne Center in suburban Detroit. An announcement came over the loudspeakers system in the hospital announcing that 2 armed men had entered the state-run facility and shots had been fired. And this, as you might imagine, set off a series of, let's say, anxiety-ridden events, from the patients, from the staff. And that is because nobody was told about this. It was, in fact, not true that there was an active shooter. This was a drill and a painfully misplaced drill, let's just say, wherever the intentions might have been, the heart being in the right place, what have you, it did not go over well. So
it's traumatic,
apparently,
right?
100%. It is traumatic, and we're going to get to what that means. But the attorney in this case, because to your point, Ben, there is trauma to be had and litigated. There is an attorney in this case, because this happened back in 2022, had this to say: "It was horrifying. Everyone went into, oh my God, this is the worst day of my life mode," she said.
The lawyers say that?
The lawyer saying this.
Okay.
Yeah, Wagner. Robin Wagner had this to say. She said, "People were hiding under their desks. They were barricading the doors, trying to figure out how to protect the children." All this is being said because it was announced this week on the 15th, as we record today on the 16th. Yesterday, the story came out of the Detroit AP. A judge has approved $13 million in damages, essentially, in a settlement that was announced over this unannounced active shooter drill that took place at, once again, a psychiatric hospital for children. Seems legit, guys. You know, Ben, you said traumatic, completely the case. Police apparently were not notified, and that first series of kind of frantic phone calls and texts and barricadings and all of that led to SWAT teams, heavily armed police forces coming down to the facility to address this active shooter situation that had been reported from multiple people present. I just can't imagine what someone was thinking. It was apparently organized by the Hawthorne Center's safety director, who works for the state.
Who is probably getting fired.
I would imagine so. It didn't say in the AP piece that I read, but it did say that the hospital was subsequently closed for reasons unrelated, but maybe this points to a larger mismanagement type problem. But the good news is that the Court of Claims Judge James Redford approved the settlement early this month on October 4th, showing that more than $3 million will be going to attorneys and between $50,000 and $60,000 a piece going to the children and their families, and also the personnel that were put in the middle of this utterly horrifying debacle of a situation. I mean, and of course the takeaway here is, thank God it wasn't a real active shooter situation, but good Lord, this was a bungled drill. You know, I don't know, guys. What do you think?
Reminds me of the 2018 false missile alert in Hawaii. But you could argue it's even more immediate and therefore more damaging, I guess, for most people listening, and not to make presumptions, but for many people in the U.S. listening, you might think of it as a more Black Mirror version of the fire alarm drills, which used to happen all the time at our office or on a semi-regular basis. And it was kind of a conspiracy, because if it is a drill, you can't let people know. Right. But they didn't let everybody who should know. So it seems like
they didn't scream fire over the freaking PA either, right?
Right. But also, you know, local law enforcement would ideally, and I'm assuming here, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that local law enforcement would need to be able to have visibility on this such that they can discern the difference between a drill and an active shooter. And shout out to our friend Lauren Vogelbaum for teaching us the word actual facts. I almost used it too.
Long may she reign. She's coined plenty of those in her day. Love you, Lauren. So just to give a little bit of numbers really quickly to the settlement, 50 children at the hospital are going to get around $60,000 each. 90 people among the staff will receive $50,000 each. And here's the kind of weird little kicker, and I guess they have to have some sort of rubric to measure this stuff with. But apparently the amount they're receiving will depend on their score on a trauma exam. And then there are 24 others that are going to get smaller amounts. But I guess I'd never really thought about the idea of taking a trauma exam.
I feel like everybody's a trauma exam.
It would have to be, though. It makes perfect sense. But it just seems like, you know, how do you measure such things, especially so far removed from the actual events? But I guess it would have to do with how much sleep have you lost? Do you have nightmares about it? Those kinds of questions would seem to be appropriate.
Well, I don't know about you, Noel, but when My son's school does an active shooter drill like this, and they do. Elementary schools do these active shooter drills on the regular now.
But do they say over the PA that there's an active shooter?
My understanding is they let the kids know what's happening, but I've never been present when one of these drills has gone on because they happen during school hours.
Sure.
And we're often notified like day of or right before or right after a drill has occurred. And I'll often have a conversation with my son about it before I know anything else. Well, and I just imagine being a kid, as you guys were talking about with those fire drills or tornado drills that we used to do, just being in that situation where you are pretending that somebody's got a gun in your school and they're coming to kill you and anybody else. Just what that does to you.
And how sad is it that we're at a place, in this country now where this is being added to the list of necessary types of drills. And we're no longer just scared about fire. Oops, somebody, set a waste paper basket on fire and now, people have to know how to react. This is something so much more traumatic long-term, just the thought that this could happen at any time. And it's not like there isn't plenty of information out on the news that you'll usually have on in the radio when you're on the way to school, taking your kid, hearing about all of these horrible events. It's tough because it's like your choices are kind of either to like live in fear as a child, but we know children are really adaptable, or just sort of normalize it. And I'm not sure which is worse. It makes me sad. It makes me sad.
I don't know. It's good to be prepared. I just feel like it creates crazy anxiety in a mind that isn't ready to handle that kind of thing, but they have to be ready now, which is insane.
It is insane. Yeah. I don't know, Ben, did you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yes, but I almost want to save them for an episode. I don't want to recap the normalization. We talked about that. That's true. We have to remember also that there is an evolution of fear-driven drills, which are necessary, as was pointing out earlier, for a certain amount of preparation. But also we have to consider, to your point, Noel, the knock-on long-term effects. We have people in the audience tonight who experienced the terrifying nuclear attack drills of the Cold War. You got to hide under the desk, and that's not going to do a gosh darn thing. When some of us, maybe in the younger part of the crowd, experienced those tornado drills where you just had to stick your butt into the center of the hallway and put your head toward the corner.
Head between legs, right? With your hands over your interlaced behind your head.
Yeah. Similar to the old aircraft crash position. Put your head between your knees and kiss your butt goodbye. Careful with that joke. It's an antique, but I think it's worth examining whether there are better ways to educate and prepare children other than something as traumatic as this. That's just my 2 cents. Adjusted for inflation, that's like 8 cents.
Well, no, I think that's let's call it 20 cents because I think you're onto something, Ben. Don't you guys think this might be a good use of augmented reality or some sort of use of VR, for something like this where the stakes are not what they might seem, in a drill like this, you're in control. But I guess maybe you have to kind of feel like you're not in control. Otherwise, you might not react correctly. I don't know, guys. I'm with you that there must be a better way. I don't know what it is, but just the idea of AR and VR came to mind. Because, Matt, you're the one who turned us on to some of that VR stuff. And even if it's pixely as hell, the all-encompassing nature of it does cause your mind to accept it as real. So I just think, you could use that to mimic a situation where you needed to react a certain way. And maybe that could be a good stand-in for something like that feels so, dangerous. Because again, I can't imagine, Matt, that at your kid's school, they scream over the loudspeakers that there's a shooter there. That's the part that's jacked up about this story, right? That, if they did that every time, there'd be way more lawsuits like this. So I think that's where the people in charge of this facility obviously went wrong.
Yeah, I can't confirm this specifically about my son's school, but I know often they use a code word, like a code something that they'll say over the speakers, or, a phrase or something, and then often a tone or something that will play that is basically a message to the teachers that often the kids are aware of. And then they go into a drill.
That makes sense.
That's at least the way I have seen it portrayed in the past.
Well, and I also got to wonder too, is it enough just to have that code word and to be able to react in a very codified way rather than be told that there's a shooter, which is then going to create an every person for themselves kind of situation, as opposed to having like procedure, you know? I just wonder, because, you know, you obviously need to be able to react if someone comes into your classroom, but it's also at that point, is there anything much you can do?
Yeah, it's often if somebody is on the school property, at least what I've seen.
Well, I appreciate both of y'all's perspectives, and it's scary stuff. But those are my two for today, y'all. So let's take a quick word from our sponsor and then return with one last piece of strange news.
And we're back. This is a big old grab bag. A couple of updates, y'all. We've talked about Boeing a whole bunch. Just going to bring this little ditty to our attention. In CNN Business, Chris Isidore wrote on Tuesday, October 15th, Boeing's crisis is getting worse. Now it's borrowing tens of billions of dollars. I'm just going to give you
mega layoffs too, right?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple lines here.
Yeah.
It gives you the context. These are Chris's words. Boeing's debt surged in the last 6 years as Boeing reported core operating losses of more than $33 billion. Its commercial airline production has ground to a near halt by a month-long strike by 33,000 members of the International Association of Machinists. Talks between Boeing and the International Association of Machinists, or IAM, broke down last week with no new negotiations planned. And on Friday before we're recording this, Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, announced plans to cut 10% of its worldwide staff of around 171,000 people, or around 17,000 human beings.
But don't worry, folks. They're all from quality control.
That's right. Just the folks who do the last checks. That's not true. We're joking, but that is the stuff we've been talking about. That's why this is an update, because Boeing is suffering very, very badly from poorly manufactured parts that then get assembled and don't fit right. Here's the last bit. So yesterday, as we record this episode, Boeing announced plans to borrow $10 billion from a consortium of banks. It also separately announced plans to raise $25 billion by selling stock and its debt. Isn't that interesting? You just sell your debt like that and raise some money. So anyway, not looking good for Boeing. Anything you guys on that end, or anything else we need to add there?
I don't think so. It just doesn't look good. I mean, I know they're one of those companies that's described as like in that too big to fail bracket, but they sure are failing pretty hard. I don't see it getting much better for them. And doesn't it seem like laying off workforce is not the best way to up their quality control?
Ultimately, I think that's a cost-saving measure, probably. Also, they're in a battle with a union, which we have seen retaliation before when there's a union battle happening where they just let a bunch of people go. So in the company's mind, they can pay the rest of the people that stay whatever the costs are, right, that they're trying to negotiate. It's a thing that happens. I don't know.
With great respect, I would posit that we are looking at conflicting priorities due to the structure of Boeing's ownership, right? They are beholden to deliver certain profits, right? Certain metric performances. And sometimes that can be priority that contradicts stuff you would imagine would be the day one things for a company that manufactures tangible assets. Noel, you have made a great point regarding the too big to fail. It may be possible that Boeing gets acquired by something else, but when you're looking at the big dogs in commercial aircraft, you're looking at Boeing and Airbus. And, not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't think any POTUS would want to be beholden to France, which is, of course, where Airbus is based. Isn't that right? Aren't they French?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that end, Boeing expects to report a loss of $9.97 a share in the third quarter, which, what do you do when you're going to report a big loss? Cut some people and save some money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and the quality control thing, by the way, yes, folks, I was entirely joking. I'm working on material for a live show on election night, and I'm trying to get our guys here to maybe do some videos for it.
Heck yeah.
Just always be closing.
Let's jump to the next thing here. We've been talking about home insurance a lot. Here is a little ditty written by Rob Wiley, I think is how you say his name, for NBC News on October 13th. Insurance nightmare unfolds for Florida homeowners after back-to-back hurricanes. Guess we'll just get to it real quickly here. These are Rob's words. Some homeowners insurance companies operating in Florida are categorizing the storms, both Helene and Milton, as two separate events, meaning anyone who did not or could not document damage from Helene before Milton hit could face even greater odds that their claim will be denied if they were hit by both storms. Basically, did you not take enough pictures? Did you not get in the right paperwork? Did you not do whatever it is that you have to do according to the papers you signed with your insurance company? Did you not finish that stuff before Milton hit? After you got hit by Helene? Well, you might be out of luck. That is according to Mark Friedlander, who's the Director of Corporate Communications for the Insurance Information Institute. Oh, also this, guys, in a statement, FEMA said, I'm going to need your help with this, it is simplifying its claims process so that it will only consolidate 2 loss claims in a circumstance where there would be no loss of recovery to the policyholder. What? No loss of recovery to the policyholder. It will only consolidate 2 claims in a circumstance where there would be no loss of recovery to the policyholder.
I don't even understand. I mean, I'm already in like insurance paranoia mode right now, and hearing this kind of stuff certainly does not improve that mental state. What does that even mean, Matt?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it means, and it really troubles me because that timing that occurred between Helene and Milton was not that long, and we all know how long an insurance claim can take to get fully, fixed and finished. To get somebody to come out to your home and inspect it after an insurance claim has occurred often takes a long time. Just all of it's going to be a debacle. And add on top of that, Florida has changed some of the ways it allows insurance companies to operate within it, basically to get insurance companies back into the Florida market. Basically, they needed to make it better for the insurance company to even operate.
It's an insurance nightmare, it would seem, just because of like how exposed that part of the country is to this kind of stuff,
Yeah, so it makes, and those changes, at least according to Rob here writing for NBC News, it would make it very, very difficult or more difficult for a homeowner to fight back against the initial decision that the insurance company made when it comes to a claim that's been filed, which, what are you going to do?
So they're already just trying to find a loophole, kind of. It sounds to me like that's what they're searching for with that language that you're talking about. It's just an excuse not to pay out, not to cover. And you've got people in this article that you found, Matt, saying, we did everything we were supposed to do. What else were we supposed to do? Like, we couldn't even get someone out to inspect it as quickly as we would have liked.
Yeah. I don't know. Just awful. So those are the 2 updates, guys. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to give you 2 other stories to look up on your own, and they're strange. They meet the criteria of this episode, so check them out. In The Guardian, you can find something written by Rachel Keenan from Friday, October 11th, titled, Woman Jailed for Life After Murdering Parents and Living with Bodies in Essex. She did so. She lived with them for around 4 years after murdering her father by poisoning and mother by hammer and stabbing, and then made a little tomb for her father where she put basically blankets on top of it, pictures, and almost like, I don't know, like some kind of memorial for him. And then shoved her mom into a sleeping bag and put her in like another room in the house, then continued to take their pension money and use it for her online gambling habit for around 4 years until the police showed up, busted in her door, and she confessed to everything in the house that day. Crazy. Look it up. It's crazy. Another one, this time in CNN, written by Issy Ronald, titled Woman Killed by Malfunctioning Ottoman Bed. Guys, I didn't know Ottomans were dangerous. Apparently they are. The ones that maybe at least I've interacted with, and maybe you guys have interacted with, generally have
pretty innocuous pieces of furniture,
Yeah, it's a bed that folds, right?
I thought an ottoman was just the thing you put your foot on. I thought a proper ottoman was just like a little foot rest.
Oh wait, maybe I'm getting this wrong. It's an Ottoman-styled gas lift bed.
Okay, that must be something different because an ottoman is also just a thing that comes with a couch. That's just the little square part that you put your feet up on. That's also an ottoman as its own thing. But what you're saying is accurate. But I of course, I picture an ottoman as the thing that I was describing. Typically.
Oh, it's a gas lift storage bed.
Yeah. Just to jump in, it's not a Murphy bed. It's like almost a horizontal version of that where you can lift it up and have like if you see beds that are, I love this construction. You see beds that have drawers you can pull out from beneath the mattress or the box
The
spring.
IKEA special, the Schwarn.
This one, if I'm understanding correctly, means that you can push the mattress up from the horizontal position or the box spring or whatever people sleep on, and then you'll have storage. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks like a 45-degree angle if you imagine the bed going up. And these are generally like hydraulic, sometimes gas-filled pistons that are moving up and down that actually hold the bed in place when it's, opened at that 45-degree angle, and then you close it back down. Well, apparently she accessed her Ottoman bed by opening it up, then got her head and neck stuck between it as it collapsed down onto her because one of the pistons was malfunctioning.
Now, this wasn't death by being crushed, though, however, right? Was she instantly dead, or what happened?
Well, no, it basically strangled her. She asphyxiated because her neck was pressed between the collapsing part of the bed and the hard part of the
base.
Bed. Yeah.
What a way to go. Yeah. This is also a very new piece of furniture for me. I'm not aware of this style of bed, but I'm seeing there is the thing I was describing, just like a 4-legged footstool ottoman, and then there is this ottoman bed, which is news to me. So, hey, you learn something every day.
Oh, yeah, it was news to me, too. What guys, I can't think of the word in my head. What is the bed that looks like a sofa and then goes down into a bed, and then it can sit back up as a sofa?
Trundle bed?
Or a trundle?
Oh, no, there's a word for that. I always thought it was Ottoman, but maybe it's wrong.
Awesome couch? Is it Transformer couch?
Megatron couch.
Again, I'm joking, but I love multifunctional furniture.
And what's the thing where the bed slides out from underneath where those drawers are that you were describing earlier, Ben? That's also a thing. I think that's a trundle bed. If you have a bed that has a drawer bed that pulls out, and then you can flop a mattress on that, that's another type of use.
I'm most familiar with trundle as one of the aliases of Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He was going as Trundle for a time.
I like it. It's
a joke for two people. And thank you, both of you.
Man. Well, hey guys, that is, I'll give you this last one because this is something worth thinking about, and then we'll get out of here. NASA launches probe toward Jupiter and its icy moon Europa to assess habitability. This is in CBS News, written by William Haywood on Monday, October 14th. Check this out.
Bro.
Learn about this.
I wish you would have brought this up first because I have something to say about this because I heard about this on the radio a couple days ago, and I'll just leave it with this. In the Arthur C. Clarke novel, 2001: A Space Odyssey, of course, the film is based on that too. Europa comes up a lot. There's also the sequel, and it's the one place the aliens say is not for you, and do not come to Europa. Do not attempt any landings on Europa.
We like it in real life science as one of the best candidates in the solar system for harboring something humans would understand as life. So there's a reason to look at it.
Well, yeah, because it seems as though, at least the data that humans have right now, is that there's some kind of giant saltwater ocean beneath the frozen crust of Europa. So like potentially, if you're beneath all that ice, somehow maybe you're a little warmer and a little safer from all the stuff that could really mess you up if you're on the surface of Europa. It would be awesome if something was there. My buddy Scott used to talk to me all the time about specifically Europa, sometimes Io, but this one in particular as being the place that we need to explore. We're not going to land, right? This thing that is going off right now, things like a 5.5-year flight just to get out to Jupiter. And then it's going to fly around and do 49 close flybys of Europa to check it out and see what it's, or at least to the best of our sensor data, it will check out what's going on.
So this is like a probe type situation? This is like an unmanned flight?
Unmanned.
I see.
Unmanned.
Okay,
it's a test flight, essentially.
Got it.
It's a $5.2 billion NASA probe. Pretty dope.
That is pretty cool. But I don't know, man. I tend to heed the words of the fictional aliens telling us to stay away.
Yeah. Thanks, fictional aliens.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's all I've got, guys.
And so In addition to thanking fictional aliens, thank you, very real entities, organic and simulated alike. We can't wait to hear from you. We will be following up with more episodes. Tune in later this week as well for our weekly listener mail segment. We want you to be part of the story. As you see, we mine a lot of this, just like asteroid interest in the near future for future episodes. And you're the best part of the show. Please join the cause. Picture us like some triumvirate-headed Uncle Sam pointing directly at your chakras, at your pineal gland, and saying, "We want you to join stuff they don't want you to know." And we try to make it easy. We try to be easy to find online.
Yes, join us on your internet platform of choice. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on YouTube, where we have video content galore for you to enjoy. Also on X, FKA Twitter, and finally on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. Get in on the conversation. Meme it up with your fellow conspiracy realists and have a ball. You can also find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and, yes, TikTok.
Why not connect your voice to our ears? Call 1-833-STDWYTK. It's our voicemail system. When you call in, you've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. Do give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void stares back. You will also find some interesting correspondence there, things that we don't get to on air, like the fact that North Korea, the DPRK, is mobilizing with Russian forces. Just had to put this in because I was going by the nickname A Holy War on our recording. North Korea claims they've mobilized 1.4 million. Unfortunately, quite young people for a holy war, which is really funny coming from an atheistic state. Anyway, your thoughts on all this and more, join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.